Coming up, the Cowboys' schedule just got tougher in 2021, and D-Day approaches for the Dallas defense. Let's talk about it next on the Blitz. It is time for another edition of the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans as we have moved into the month of April. Happy Easter, everybody. Hope you've had a great holiday weekend. Let's talk about what's going on with the Cowboys leading up to the NFL draft on April 29th. It is fast approaching. We got a lot to get to over the course of the next half hour, and I think it's just a really exciting time of the year.
It is exciting because there's so many possibilities for an NFL franchise, and of course there's so many possibilities in the next 4 weeks leading into the draft because it's unpredictable as ever this year in this unheard of offseason. So I'm excited to do it along with you.
Well, and the other thing that's going to happen in the course of the next couple of weeks, the NFL schedule is going to come out, and we do know this as a result of the owners' meetings this past week. The NFL has added a 17th game as expected for all teams, and what that means for the Cowboys, well, the schedule got tougher because they are headed to New England and they're taking on Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. How much money have they spent this offseason to shore up that team? Belichick doesn't like going 7-9. They're going to be a better team in 2021, and the Cowboys got to face them on the road.
Yeah, this isn't going to be the same Patriots team that we saw this past year, and the Cowboys traditionally as a franchise have not had very much success against New England as of late. They haven't won against the Patriots since 1996. This is the first time, however, they'll face the Patriots without Tom Brady since '99. So it's going to be a different looking Patriots team, not only from this past year into 2021, but from the last time the Cowboys faced them back in 2019. And you remember that sloppy game. Hopefully this one's not in November, but that was a 13-9 loss that was played in the rain, a little bit of sleet. It was not fun for the Cowboys moving up to the Massachusetts area.
And of course, the reason they're playing the Patriots, the way that the NFL is going to do this as far as the 17th game, the Cowboys and Patriots finished in the same spot in the standings in their respective divisions last season, and so they match up against each other. As you look ahead, the NFC East teams the next 4 years, this year it's against an AFC East team, the year after that in 2022 against the AFC North, then the West, and then the South. With the 17-game schedule, there will only be 3 preseason games for most all teams. Of course, the Cowboys with the Hall of Fame game this year as well, and only 1 bye week. The season is pushed back to where the Super Bowl will now take place a week later in mid-February, and I know the TV networks love that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, when you look at the money that's going to come in for the league, this 17th game was a no-brainer. However, it is a bit of a shorthand for the players. The owners got that collective bargaining agreement to go their way prior to the 2021 owners meetings, and so that's where really things kind of shaped up. And now that you've got that 17th game, things will change. You talk about the durability of these players. Think about the rookies going from a shortened college season this year in 2020 and then moving into a 17-game NFL season. It's going to be a war of nutrition going into this 2021 campaign, and it's going to be fun to watch. But also think about the records that could fall. You talk about passing records, rushing records, scoring records even for teams, individuals. Peyton Manning holds both the passing touchdowns and passing yards records. Those could both potentially fall in the coming years. So it opens up a door for players, even though they may not necessarily like how long the season may be.
And the door is open for more international games. In fact, over the course of the next 8 years, all NFL teams will play a home game overseas or in Mexico City, and so we'll see how that shakes out over the course of the next 8 years and see where the Cowboys will be playing their international games as well. All right, we're just getting started on this edition of The Blitz. In a moment, let's talk defense, and let's talk Dan Quinn. What kind of impact will he make in 2021?
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys. And by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours. This segment is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones now joined by Nick Eatman of DallasCowboys.com. And let's talk Dallas defense and how they are shoring up this defense this offseason, starting with back in January with the change of defensive coordinator. How big of an impact do you think Dan Quinn is going to make on this 2021 team?
Well, I'm glad you said it that way, starting then, because I think that is the biggest splash that they have made on the defense, other than maybe, we're obviously getting Dak Prescott, on the offense. But on the defensive side of the ball, I think Dan Quinn is their splash hire there because of his success of what he's done. I think he's going to change. Not a lot. Mike McCarthy said the other day, we're not going to start back at zero, which I think maybe you can debate that because, of what happened last year. He's going to bring some toughness. He's going to bring a flexibility of a 3-4-4-3 scheme that we didn't see last year. We thought we were going to see it with Mike Nolan. We didn't. And I think he's going to bring some versatility out in some of those players that they can play multiple schemes.
Yeah, I think maybe you may be starting at below ground zero when you're coming off a season in which you've given up the most points in the 61-year history of the franchise. All right, he also is bringing a couple of players he's very familiar with in Atlanta, recent signees in free agency. Of course, the safety DeMonte Kazee, and prior to that, guy who played safety with Atlanta is going to work at linebacker here, Keanu Neal. Where do you see those? How big of an impact do you think those guys will make?
Well, what I like, we'll start with, with Kazee. I mean, he's a guy that's going to get the ball. I mean, that's what he's done. He's got 7 interceptions one year, 3 another. So when you go back and just look at safeties that get 7 interceptions, I had to go all the way back to Michael Downs, 1984, the last time the Cowboys had a safety, with that many interceptions. And so that's a good thing there. He's coming off an Achilles injury. That's never a good thing, especially when you're talking about defensive backs. But I just like the ball hawking type of skills that he's got there. And then with Keanu Neal, it's interesting. He's going to start with the linebackers. I'm sure he'll be playing a lot of nickel. Every year he's been healthy, Bill, he gets 100 tackles. So he's around that line of scrimmage. He's a physical player. I think, and they know the system. That's another thing. They will walk in here and know what Dan Quinn's going to run. And
prior to his injuries back in 2017, he was a Pro Bowl player for the Atlanta Falcons. All right, up front on defense, what changes do you think will happen with the front 7? Well, I do think that, you'll see the guys on the outside the same, DeMarcus Lawrence and Randy Gregory. But one thing that I think you might see a little bit more of, and they're going to have to figure out Jalen Smith where he could really help them. I mean, he's on the team. He's going to play. He's going to contribute. Had a lot of tackles last year. I think you'll see him rushing the passer more than he has before. Maybe off the edge. Maybe, as third downs, they like to slide some of the big guys inside. So you got Gregory. You've got D-Law. But I think you might see Jalen Smith doing some rushing as well. And, of course, there is still a big influence on defense in this draft. Maybe they can find a Grady Jarrett in this draft in the 5th round like Dan Quinn did with the Atlanta Falcons about 6 years ago. I like it. All right, Nick Eatman, we appreciate it. And up next here on The Blitz, let's talk tight ends. Could the Cowboys take a tight end in this draft? Where are they at tight end? Let's talk about it next.
This segment was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones with Kyle Youmans, and let's talk about a position group on this Cowboys team that appears to be pretty strong. Blake Jarwin, of course, got hurt in the first game of the year last year. Dalton Schultz had a very nice season. Blake Bell's now moved on back to Kansas City. Let's talk about the top two guys here, and how about look at some career stats and how they stack up. Jarwin, as you know, Kyle, was going to have a huge year last year, but Schultz comes through and it put up some very nice numbers last year.
Yeah, it was a very welcome sight to see what Dalton Schultz was able to do. I mean, he entered last season with just 13 receptions and 122 yards total for his career, which I guess was only 2 years, but then you put the numbers of 63 receptions, 4 touchdowns, over 600 yards, and what he was able to bring last year in the absence of Blake Jarwin. I think it was something that the Cowboys are very happy moving forward and looking at, because as a 4th-round pick previously, they looked at Dalton Schultz as a bit of a disappointment in his first 2 years. Well, he came out, played exceptionally well, and a lot of people might say that might put pressure on Blake Jarwin. I don't necessarily think that's the case. Jarwin, of course, signing that 4-year, $22 million deal prior to last year, and then, of course, the injury in Week 1 against the Los Angeles Rams. I think now it allows him to play a little bit more loose and play a little bit of that maybe not blocking role, but the receiving threat that Jarwin could potentially be. I think as a duo, these two will work better together than they will separately, and that's what we've only seen so far, is really them working separately from each other in the past.
And of course, traditionally for this Cowboys offense, you use 2 tight ends a lot, and most NFL teams do. One of those guys more of a blocking tight end. I like the receiving threat of both Jarwin and Schultz. I do think Blake Bell played well as that second blocking tight end last year. Sean McKeon can take on some of that role this year. But let me throw out a guy that a lot of people are talking about in the draft, Kyle Pitts. Cowboys pick at number 10 in the first round. I think Kyle Pitts, the Florida tight end, is going to be gone by 10. But let's just say something crazy happens and he's available for the Cowboys at 10. Would the Cowboys go for a Kyle Pitts, keeping in mind where Dalton Schultz is in his contract?
Yeah, I think this is a great debate among Cowboys draft fans out there, because, of course, Kyle Pitts, just giving you the foundations for those of you who don't know the name, he's a freak. He is as good as they have come from a tight end prospect, maybe ever. I mean, he has measurables close to Megatron. He has the longest wingspan of any wide receiver or tight end in the past 20 years. He is just an absolute physical mismatch that will translate to the NFL, and he can run well, too. 4.4, 4.40, and I think that's something that a lot of NFL teams are drooling over. Because of that, I'm with you. I don't necessarily think he falls to 10, but because of the tight end position, maybe being a little undervalued compared to offensive tackles, compared to maybe some of these wide receivers and these quarterbacks early in the draft, there's a chance he slips to 10. The question is he above Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin? That's going to be up to the Cowboys to decide. I think he would be better than both of those guys.
Well, and I can just picture Kellen Moore this offseason back in his lab here at the Star, just looking even at Schultz and Jarwin, 2 guys who can catch the football at tight end, and what he can do with that offense from a scheme standpoint. Of course, you need guys to protect Dak Prescott at quarterback. Where are the Cowboys as far as offensive linemen, offensive tackles in this draft? How about this guy? Put up 33 reps at his pro day. Let's talk about him next.
An athletic kid that has some quicks, can stick his foot in the ground and redirect.
He's hair on fire. He plays the right way.
This guy can run. He's going to play hard. He's going to chase the ball.
Worried about instincts, too. I thought this guy was a little raw in terms of his finding the football.
Love the way he plays, love the way he gets off.
Give him credit for what he is, but he's small. Just like his compete. He just can handle it at times.
His main thing is his strength. This dude's super strong.
He's really smart. He's reading hats. Just has a really good feel for the game.
He's good on the field, but in the weight room and taking care of his body, he just needs pushed. Kind of trains harder than he wants to be tight end.
The scouting department and the NFL front offices around the league continuing their preparations for the NFL draft as we are underneath a month away. Kyle Youmans, David Hellman, DallasCowboys.com draft expert, back here for the Blitz. And Dave, a sneaky need for the Dallas Cowboys when the draft comes around might be actually on the offensive side of the football. Defense is certainly the priority, but you might want to try and shore up that offensive line a little bit after 2020.
Yeah, I don't know how sneaky it even is. Like, that's the scary thing, and any Cowboy fan knows what I'm talking about. Tyron Smith obviously missed the vast majority of last season. He's missed games in 5 straight seasons. Lyle Collins, keep hearing good things about his hip, but when you miss an entire season with a hip injury, that's kind of scary. I know Cowboy fans don't want to have to watch a makeshift tackle position again, and on top of that, 2 of the absolute best prospects that might be available to you at number 10 are offensive tackles.
Well, let's talk about those 2 prospects, because I think there's 2 guys there, especially right up at the top of the draft, where you could say these guys could be future Pro Bowlers, maybe even all pros if you talk about how well the Cowboys have drafted in the offensive line in the draft room lately. But talk about Penei Sewell out of Oregon and then Rashawn Slater from Washington.
It's really funny because they're both opt-out guys. Neither one of them played in 2020, and yet you look at the athleticism, you look at the tape, it's really impressive. A lot of people fell in love with Rashawn Slater for the way that he basically manhandled Chase Young, the Ohio State phenom who played like a boss for Washington last season. Handled him quite well in 2019, and then Penei Sewell honestly is getting a lot of comparisons to our own Tyron Smith. You talk about a super young guy, 20 years old. He's really only played 2 seasons of big-time football. Super athletic. Comes from the Pac-12 just like Tyron did, so the parallels are definitely there. And I understand why people think that these guys are going to be, 10-year type starters in the NFL.
And the fun thing about Rashawn Slater, I also said Washington. It's actually Northwestern, different purple school, however. But
it all blends together
it does.
in April, man.
Whenever draft season comes around, that's exactly what the case will be. But talk about how whenever it comes to Rashawn Slater, there's versatility there. He can play inside at the guard spot. He can play on the outside and play offensive tackle. So if the Cowboys were to select a guy like him at the 10th overall pick, there's an option that he plays his first year.
And I think that's another thing that makes it so appealing is, the hope is obviously that Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins are going to start for you next year. If they do, that's great. Rashawn Slater's a guy that could probably kick inside and play left guard if you wanted him to. I mean, he could play either guard spot, but you happen to have an all-pro by the name of Zach Martin on the right side, so probably not necessary. I think that is something that's intriguing. I think Sewell is more of a pure tackle, at least in my mind. A young guy like that, I think you want him to develop in the position. You want him to play as much as possible. But for my money, if you're getting that guy, like, if he's not a starter year 1, that doesn't bother me, honestly, like a guy of that talent. But it is definitely intriguing that Slater can do a little bit of both.
Now, as we wrap things up, whenever it comes to the offensive tackle position, depth is always going to be an issue in a draft class. What does the depth look like here? Because we've talked about some of the top guys. Are there guys later on that the Cowboys could potentially look for?
There definitely are. My advice would be don't push your luck. Offensive tackle for me is a lot like pass rusher. Of course, there's always going to be success stories later on in the draft, but if you can rush the passer, if you can cover, if you can play quarterback, and if you can protect the quarterback, those guys get drafted high. You don't find Pro Bowlers deep in the later rounds often. And so I'm looking at round 2 as a sweet spot maybe, guys that I love a lot. Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama, one of my absolute favorite players in this class. Might not be realistic that he's there at 44. Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame is another guy that I think you could get. And then once you're talking about the 3rd round, like, don't get me wrong, there are good players there. But again, if you're talking about the future, not trusting the durability of the guys that you have, I think the earlier the better. So it doesn't necessarily have to be number 10. But I would definitely try to take care of it by day 2 if I was going to do it.
Offensive line, not a sneaky need, in the words of David Hellman. The Cowboys are going to have to try and address that. And, hey, you might be able to look at some of those offensive tackles in the draft in our DallasCowboys.com draft shot. Draft guide. Yeah. When we come back, we're going to talk more about where you could get one of those draft guides right after this on the Blitz.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours.
As we wrap up the Blitz, we paid tribute to the Cowboys' longtime video director, Robert Blackwell, who is retiring after 40 years with the Cowboys organization, some 835 games, and over the course of the last 32 years, he has also been the Cowboys' representative at the NFL Draft. He will be sorely missed here at the Star in Frisco. Happy retirement, Robert Blackwell, after 40 years with the Cowboys. All right. The draft guide is out, and Kyle Youmans, you put in so much work on it. I was going to say yeoman work, but
that's good
for another.
That's a good one, too. No, yeah, 80 profiles back and forth between this magazine of all sorts of draft prospects, 8 players per draft team, or draft position rather, and then there's a list of the rest of the guys. You've got Bucky Brooks, of course, from the NFL Network. He gives his pet cat. So much information in this magazine. You can, of course, get it on DallasCowboys.com. You see the rest of the information there. It is worth it. It was a lot of fun to put together, though, because this is an unpredictable draft. This is the roadmap through it.
25 days until draft day for Kyle Youmans. I'm Bill Jones, and we will see you again next week here on The Blitz.